This episode of the 7Horse Nation podcast is brought to you by Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. It's absolutely free to use. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Now let's get on with the show.
How about now?
I got you.
Yes.
All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? We're back. Episode 2 of the 7Horse Nation podcast. And they said it wouldn't last. Phil Levitt here, drums and vocals, along with my partner,
Joey Callio here. Sometimes vocals, mostly guitar.
Yes. You know, we mentioned this on the last episode. By the way, thanks everybody for listening to the first episode. We got a lot of great reactions, got a lot of listeners, and we're excited to keep it rolling. This one's a little different in that I am here in Los Angeles in the Grow Lab, and Joey is up at Ground Zero for Coronavirus U.S. edition.
Yes. I'm in a safe zone, Phil.
You are. Are you quarantined right now?
I'm self-quarantined, but not for any good reason.
You're not sick. Just so we just get that out. You do not have coronavirus.
No,
is that correct?
I do not.
But let's talk about it for a second. I'm curious because I'm down here and
Sure.
It hasn't really broken loose. I mean, we do have, like, everywhere in the country or most places. I guess there are cases down here, but Seattle, it seemed to break loose a little bit because I guess there was a hospital or something where it kind of got a foothold. So what's life like right now for you? I mean, it was not that far from where you live, right?
No, it's I'll talk in LA terms. It's 20 minutes away, Phil.
Exactly.
Which, that's not that far away, right?
No, that's not in LA terms. That might be a mile from here.
No, exactly. It could be less than that. Yeah, there's definitely a vibe. It's not, I don't see people running around, like screaming and running and manically, people aren't pushing and shoving in line. And
it's not Armageddon yet.
It's not quite there yet. No, I think we're gonna keep a lid on the Armageddon freak out. But there is a vibe, people, right. You get that, like, I know I've hugged you a million times. Should we do it? It's like, and your brain processes that question in, like, a millisecond. And it's just stuff like that's happening,
Right. You're a Costco guy, I know that. So what I mean, you did you go out for supplies, and what was the vibe like? What did you see it?
Thank you for mentioning the Costco connection, Phil. Yes, for wine and coffee, you cannot Costco.
Right.
I mean, on a certain level, I guess you could. It's just not at the price.
Yeah.
But so I went to, speaking of wine and coffee, I was on a wine and coffee run, and I thought, well, I'm here. Maybe I could just grab a couple of things, and I just went right to the wine place, and my wine guy Dan was there, who is amazing, and he's a fan.
Mm-hmm. And does he listen to the podcast? Let's hope so.
I will. I'll mention it now.
Yeah, you gotta hip him. You gotta hip him to it because he just got a shout out.
It's true. It's true. He's a wine aficionado. He's a brother in winedom. So I was talking to him, and our usual back and forth, and he said, yeah, this was when he came to work. This was, I guess it was about a week ago, which is, I don't know what date that would be. Maybe whatever.
A week ago. 7 days ago. Before.
Yeah. We'll go with that. He said when he came to work, there was a 1,200 person line waiting for them to open the doors. He said he's never seen anything like it. So, wow. It was going off. I mean, it's pretty much safe to say all I got was coffee and wine that day. There was nothing else, man. It was all gone.
Wow.
So, stuff like that's happening.
Right. Well, stay safe out there, everybody, and wash your hands. That
Hmm.
seems to be the key that they keep harping on. I'm pretty clean as it is, but I'm gonna, I got to admit, I have washed them a few extra times than I probably would have, and that's probably a good habit to get into anyway. Meanwhile, let's update everybody on what's going on in the Seven Horse Nation. We finished 4 songs. We mixed them. We got them mastered. It sounds awesome. And we're gearing up for another session. I mean, we're going to keep recording. We're working on this is our 5th record. You realize that?
God, that's awesome.
And you always predicted that the 5th record was kind of an important record for us.
I did. I
Yeah.
did. I said that a long time ago. Did I know what the hell I was talking about? Who knows?
Right.
I say a lot of things, Phil.
Yeah. No, I know. But this session went really well, and the tracks came back sounding great. So we've got another session scheduled. We just lined up the time back at Station House. We're gonna repeat the process. You're coming back to Los Angeles at the end of March, and we're gonna spend some more time writing together, and then go right into the studio back with Brian Whelan, and then take it over and get it mixed. So that really came out great. We're going to release a track at the end of this month from this last session. So we're on a pretty tight every 6 week release schedule, and we're excited to get another track out. We're also working on a vinyl reissue of our second record,
Mm,
which is songs for a voodoo wedding. We've got the package almost together, and we're going to put that up for pre-sale to you vinyl enthusiasts.
that's got some
And
good songs on it. That record.
yeah, it does. There's some 7 Horse staples on there, like "Please Come On Home," "So Old Fashioned," "A Friend in Weed," and of course "Flying High with No ID," which we made a pretty cool video for a
Uh,
few years ago.
Speaking of that record, I was talking to my buddy Matt last night on the phone. He saw us at the Troubadour. Said we were pretty good, man. But he did have one complaint.
That we did not play "Flying High with No ID."
No, Carousel Bar.
Oh, Carousel Bar.
That's on
Yeah,
that record, right?
it is.
Okay.
That record, let's talk for a second about second album.
Yeah.
Um, because there is a thing in music about, like, they call it the sophomore slump,
Right.
and we've actually been through 2 second albums. We made back in the Dada days, we followed up our hit album Puzzle with a second record. I'm not,
Smash
yeah,
hit.
yeah. Well, I mean, in the scope of that band's career, that was a pretty big hit.
That was it. That
Um,
was the hit.
yeah, and in 7 Horse, we've made a second record. What are your thoughts on that whole idea of the sophomore slump? Is there something about second records that people should understand?
I think there was way more of a whatever cloud, however you want to put it, on the Dada second record. That had way more pressure, I think. Plus, we were younger and didn't
Right.
didn't know anything about anything, Phil, and it had record company vibe on it. To me, that's the thing, like the pressure to make the bank happy, essentially.
Well, do you think there's anything to the fact that you hear this a lot, that a band might spend from its inception to the time it makes its first record, or even prior to that, you've been writing these songs for years and years, and
Right.
then you finally get a chance to record them, and then you have some success, and you got to turn around and get right back in the studio. I mean, I think in Dada's case, we were out on the road for a year and a half or so.
Yep.
Then it was like, okay, you got to get back in and make a record. And when did you have time to write a bunch of songs? Because you've been, touring your ass off for the
Right.
last year now.
I think
So
I
you've
did.
spent,
I did some writing on those
you
tours,
did, yeah,
but it was dribs and drabs. I didn't write whole
right.
songs. I wrote. I actually I wrote lyrics on, like, remember the days of being in a hotel and there'd be a pad and a pen by the
Right.
pre cell phone,
Yeah.
no typing in notes or any of that stuff. So there was a lot of scraps of paper with lyrics.
Uh-huh.
I mainly ideas, not full songs, just like
Right.
a verse kind of thing. But yeah, there's no time really to write a whole song.
Right. But in the case of 7 Horse, it was a little different because we were completely in control of what we were doing with our schedule. I mean, we were, making our own schedule and deciding when we were going to go out and tour, and then deciding when we were going to write. And I think I don't really, I don't have any real strong memories of the writing process on Songs for a Voodoo Wedding. I do know that I went to New Orleans and for a voodoo wedding. I mean, that's where this whole thing came from.
Right.
Some friends of ours got remarried, actually. They were already married, but they had a renewal of their vows ceremony in New Orleans. And Cookie and I went out there to be a part of the wedding. I hadn't really, I mean, I'd been to New Orleans, we toured through there, but I'd never really hung out there for any length of time. And this was an opportunity to really kind of get into New Orleans a little bit. And I just got, so blown away by the whole scene in New Orleans and
The culture.
got inspired. Yeah,
Yeah.
the culture, the music, the food,
Right.
just the lifestyle, the attitude. And then there's also another layer beneath that, which you don't get really on your first time through there. The history, I mean, it's a lot deeper than just Bourbon Street. But,
Right.
That's
like
I did get a
Disneyland.
taste of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bourbon Street's a little like drunk Disneyland.
Yeah, totally.
But there's a lot more to New Orleans than that, and on subsequent trips, I've gotten even deeper into it. But I was highly affected by that first trip in there, and then of course the actual flight out there was the impetus for flying high with no ID, because I did in fact go to the airport with a cannabis lollipop in my mouth, trying to lighten
Why
the
would
burden
that
of
day
the
be
trip.
any different than every other?
Yeah. But I mean, the weird thing was, of course, that I forgot my driver's license at home. Now, I show up at the airport trying to get checked into this flight, and I get to the TSA guy and I open my wallet, and there's no driver's license in there. The panic ensued. But I did find out that you can get on a flight. I mean, I don't know how it is right now, but
Right.
this was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And there was no trouble, really. They have a phone number. You show up without an ID at the airport, and you tell them who you are. And if they don't suspect you as being a terrorist or something, they pick up the phone, and there's a number they can call.
Did you answer any
They start,
questions?
they start asking you questions, and if you can come up with the answers. Now, it wasn't completely easy to answer these questions because the cannabis lollipop, but
Super high.
I guess I pulled it off because they let us on the flight. And then I, went through the whole trip in New Orleans, never got ID'd, never got carded, but coming back out of New Orleans, we're at the airport, and we had been drinking pretty consistently while we were down there, so we were going to have one more for the road. We're at the airport bar in New Orleans, order a beer, and they want to see ID, and I can't provide it. They would not serve me.
Well, I mean,
That was when I
if you're
paid
going
the
to
price.
time it, that's if one,
Right.
if you're going to be denied one the whole trip, that was a good one.
So anyway, that was the foundation of Songs for a Voodoo Wedding, and then that record was recorded in several studios
Didn't we
here
go
in
out to the
Los
desert and
Angeles.
do some writing for that one?
No, that was the next one. That was the next one. We recorded here in LA. We recorded in Milwaukee a couple of songs, and we recorded
Milwaukee.
I think we went
Milwaukee.
Yeah.
You're not just going to skim over that.
All right, Milwaukee. Well, we were actually finished, and we found out that we had gotten the Wolf of Wall Street in the airport,
Right.
In Milwaukee.
That was the most hungover I've ever seen you in my life.
Yeah, that was brutal.
I've never seen you like that.
I've cut way back since then, man.
Yeah.
That was kind of a heyday period. Anyway, so I hope you guys, if you're interested in vinyl, this one's really going to be cool. It's going to look great. The package is great. I've seen the jacket. We're just kind of tightening up the final details, and we're going to present that pretty soon. But we're even more excited about what we're doing right now, which is getting ready to get back in the studio and continue to work on the 5th record.
Indeed.
Which brings me to the guest that we are going to talk to today, the conversation that we're about to have here. I don't know if you realize this, you probably do, but there's only one, outside of you and me, there's one person who's had his hands on every single 7-Horse track that we've ever recorded.
Nice.
And we've worked with a lot of different people, but
Yep.
there's one guy who is kind of like the key guy who's been involved in every single song. And that's the guest we have today on the podcast, the great. And I always start with the great when I talk about this guy.
It's hard not to.
It is. The great Dave Way, our producer, our mixer, a great friend of ours, and a super talented music man. That's the way I would refer to him, because
he can do everything.
Yeah, I mean, he's a player. He plays a lot of instruments. I've heard him on drums, bass, guitar. Plays little keyboards. But I think I'm interested to see if you agree with me. I think the thing he does the best, or his best instrument, is his ears.
Yes.
I mean, he's just got a great pair of ears. He's a real musical producer and engineer. I mean, one of the most musical engineers I've ever been around.
Right.
And,
He's got good ideas. He's got good taste.
Great taste. He's a Beatles guy.
Mm-hmm.
All the vintage stuff that we're into,
Right.
he's right there. I mean, we've been working with him for a long time. It goes back like 2007 is when we started working with Dave. He actually mixed a Dada EP that we put out in 2007. That's how we got started with him.
Right.
And we came back to him with 7Horse, and he's been involved since Meth Lab Zoso Sticker and has mixed every single track we've put out.
Excellent.
Produced Superfecta, produced a couple of, we did the Parties On with him.
Yeah.
And, so we've recorded with him from the ground up. He's mixed everything we've ever done. It's always a great experience, don't you think, working with him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He got the right personality. He's got the right vibe. He's got the right energy, but he's so on point with, his intuition. And even if we're just on the different planet on a certain song, somehow it all comes together. It never goes bad,
I think he's taught us a lot too. I think we've learned a lot from him along the way, because
let's start with, we shorten everything we ever do, because we know Dave's going to cut that out anyways. So let's just get it out.
I mean, the guy came with a pair of scissors to the session.
Totally.
And, I mean, he's got a knack for just getting things as tight and to the essence as they can be, and that's a good quality. And I hear this a lot. I listen to people put tracks up on Facebook or whatever. Musicians put stuff up. I hear other people's songs, and I'm so aware of it now. It's like you've got an intro that's 16 bars. Like, well, that should have been 8. And then that was
right.
That's a Dave Way thing. He's not going to let you get bored at all listening.
Right.
He's focused on that, which is really cool. He's a 4-time Grammy winner. He's worked with a long list,
a plethora
of Rock and Roll Hall of Famers,
yes,
Grammy winners, big name artists, and us.
How did we get in that? We don't. Yeah, whatever.
But we had a great conversation with Dave, and let's get into it. Here's us and Dave Way. All right, Dave. First off, thanks for doing this on Sunday. I know you don't like to work on Sunday. You're one of the busiest guys I know. You are always, every time I call you, every time I text you, you are always in the middle of it. And that's super cool.
It's good.
Yeah.
Good.
We're here. I'm here. Joey is back at
COVID HQ.
Yeah.
I'm hunkered down.
Yeah. I'm here up at the way station. This is our first remote on the podcast. This is the room that we've mixed a lot of stuff in. I mean, everything.
Yeah.
I mentioned this, outside of Joey and I, there's only one other hand that's been in every single 7Horse track.
Yep.
That's you.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah. So for everybody listening, let me give you a sense of who Dave Way is. 4-time Grammy Award winner, which we are going to touch on, but the list of artists is long. Fiona Apple, Sheryl Crow, Pink, Christina Aguilera, Macy Gray, Ringo Starr, Shakira, John Doe of X, Michael Jackson, Mick Jagger, Stevie Wonder, the Foo Fighters, Andrew WK, TLC. I mean, it goes on. Tony Braxton, Boyz II Men, Babyface, and then most recently, Echo in the Canyon. You were heavily involved in that. So what a wide variety of musical styles. And so how did this all get? You're an East Coast guy, right?
Yep. From New York, Long Island to be exact. Born in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Grew up on Long Island. Brooklyn, yeah. As you know, New York, particularly when I was a kid, there's a lot of music in New York. So back then, you only listened to what was on the radio or what somebody played you, like your parents or your brothers or whoever. So I was the oldest, so I didn't have any brothers or anybody, necessarily older than me showing me stuff. So I was just finding stuff basically on the radio. A lot of times just AM radio, what you're listening to in the car.
What kind of music did your parents like at that time?
Frank Sinatra, a lot of Frank in our house back then. I remember hearing when I was still living in Brooklyn, The Fifth Dimension and Simon and Garfunkel. Let's see, what else? Glenn Campbell.
So this is like great pop radio,
right,
of the early 70s.
If you ask me, 1966 is the pinnacle of pop radio, in my opinion. That's probably
66?
very biased.
Right.
Yeah, I would put it right at 66.
Okay. Yeah. And that's a pivotal point in your life because you're a kid.
Well, I was 3. Yeah. so I kind of missed the boat just by a couple of years, maybe. But when you look back at it, I mean, if you ever go, it's so easy to look this stuff up now, but you look at 1966 and it's just like a powerhouse of mostly stuff recorded, a lot of it recorded here in LA, like,
Sure.
like that you mentioned the Echo in the Canyon thing. I mean, that's kind of exactly the spot right here at that time. 66 is kind of
that's the Wrecking
Crew.
Crew.
The Wrecking Crew. Yeah. Yep. It's, the great songwriters, pop songwriters. And at that point, kind of just starting to write in a new way, that was kind of geared towards like this new teenage freedom that was like
it also seems like that was the setup for a gigantic explosion that was about to happen too. I mean, it was they primed the pump big time that year.
So you started, like we all do, listening to music, and then you're going to start playing. Well, what's your instrument? What's the way in? Because I've seen you on everything. I've seen you on, we've hung out a little bit. I've seen you on behind the drums, on the bass. You play guitar. You play the piano a little bit.
Yeah. It started on piano lessons. I don't even know how old I was, maybe 11, something like that, 10 or 11 piano lessons. I took lessons from a guy named Lee Konitz, who was right down, not that Lee Konitz, but another Lee Konitz.
Okay.
For the jazz aficionados whose ears perked up there.
Right.
But, he taught me what you start most kids on, like the John Thompson book, and you're reading your scales and learning how to sight read and stuff. And I just hated the stupid little songs that you had to play. And I just want to learn how to play Beatles songs, And so at one point I was ready to quit. And I said, I just want to learn how to play Beatles songs. And he said, okay, we can do that. And at that point, he started teaching me chords and music theory, how to take like the sheet music for Hey Jude or something and read what the chords are.
Right.
And especially if I already kind of knew the song, and I started to figure out all the chords. And then I just was able to sit there and play the chords and sing along. And that's when I was like, oh, this is fun.
Right.
That got me totally into just sitting at the piano in our living room after school for hours. My dad knew about chords too. He was a barbershop singer.
Oh yeah.
So there was always a lot of harmony in our house growing up.
See, this makes a lot of sense to me because I was going to ask you about that because for a guy who really doesn't sing a lick, now we'll say that. I will say that about you. That's the one area.
Yes, right. Yeah.
But having said that, you have a great ear for harmony. And you always come up with interesting parts if you can get it out.
Yeah.
Somebody has to figure out what you're trying to get across, but we usually get there and find whatever. But the parts are always like really interesting, or they're the right notes and they're always cool. So this comes from this connection to a barbershop.
Definitely a lot of it comes from barbershop.
I mean, was that around the house or the guys in the house?
Oh yeah, my dad,
and
he was in a quartet. I remember being in our pajamas in the living room, just before they were going to start rehearsing, and we would get to listen to them for 20 minutes, a half an hour, listen to a couple of songs, and then we had to go to bed, and we could still hear them while we were up in our rooms.
So you mentioned you didn't have any older brothers, but you do have
I have a younger brother, 2 years younger, and my sister is 5 years younger.
They're not in music. They're not involved.
Well, my brother and I were in bands like about when I was right at the end of high school, beginning of right out of high school. I never got to see the Beatles, but I did get to see Beatlemania at the Winter Garden Theater in Manhattan. So I think I was 13 when we went to see Beatlemania. And then I was like, I want a guitar. I want to learn how to play guitar. And we had, this is crazy, I don't even know how we got it. Somebody gave it to us or something. We had a Hagstrom 12 string.
Nice.
For some reason. Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
But, you can't start on a Hagstrom 12
No,
string,
no.
right?
That's a
No.
lot
But,
under your
right,
fingers.
but I remember
Yeah.
trying because
Yeah.
it was the only thing we had, and the teacher was like, you can't, you can't do this, I think my first guitar, from what I remember, was a Univox. It looked like a Malsrite.
Right.
You
Yeah,
know which one I'm
sure.
talking about, Joey.
Of course.
So that was the first guitar I had.
Ventures, Ramones.
Right, exactly.
So growing up in that house, I mean, what were your folks doing for what your
They were so
parents do for a
supportive, my mom in particular, because we would just set up we would rehearse in our living room, and so the stuff just kind of sat there in our living room because that's where the piano was.
Uh-huh.
And so we had a drum kit and bass rig and guitar amps, and the guitar player in our band, like all guitarists,
left
Joey,
this stuff at your
had just had a big Sun amp and like pedals, guitar stand, which at the point was it was like, oh, he's got a stand, yeah. And that's kind of when, and he had like a phase shifter. I remember he had an Electro Harmonix Phase Mistress, and I just thought this was the coolest freaking pedal in the world. And I remember hooking it up to the piano, like putting a microphone through it. From a young age, I had an obsession with tape recorders, with little cassette recorders like everybody had. And I used to love to just record anything and everything. Like I would record Star Trek episodes.
Totally. 100%.
And I would record stuff off the radio, off the transistor radio, or and I remember I would also just love to record, like put the tape recorder like in the living room and just let it go, and then go back and listen to it later to just see what happened.
It's like a
in
spy.
the
Spy, yeah.
like surveillance, but it's like, oh, this is the part when the dog freaks out and somebody comes in, so that kind of stuff. I always just loved listening to things back. It was like reliving things, or it was just had this cool thing. And I remember in the band that I was in high school, this guitar player who I told you had like a lot of good equipment, he also had a 1/4-inch Sony tape recorder, right? Mono. And I remember the first time I met him, I went over so we were introduced in high school. I went over to meet him, and we rehearsed at his house in his basement. And he already had like a couple of microphones set up, and he played piano also, and he sang real good. So we recorded with his setup on this 1/4-inch Sony machine, a version of Best of My Love, the Eagles version. And I think I was playing guitar, and I had never even played the song before. And I remember hearing it back, and I was like, holy shit, that's us. We sound awesome. And that's when I realized, because there was something about tape, like that tape machine really made us sound good. Yeah. Right. And then I started overdubbing between that and my cassette recorder.
I was going to ask you about that.
Right. That was the next thing, bouncing back and forth.
2 tape recorders.
Right.
And that kind of thing continued into when I finally got to Berkeley.
Since you mentioned Berkeley, for people that don't know, there's a music school in Boston, the Berkeley College of Music. I've known a lot of guys who've gone there. When I was at Blue Man Group, there were a lot of Berkeley guys there. Most people didn't graduate. Did you actually finish at this school?
I did. I was there for 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I loved it, because what happened was, after I graduated high school, I went for one ill-fated semester to Tulane University in New Orleans. I got accepted there, amazingly. I don't know how. For some reason, I liked architecture when I was in high school. So I remember my uncle, who was my guidance counselor, said, well, architecture, you got to go to a lot of years of schooling and stuff. You might want to think about civil engineering, because it's less school and you can get a really good job. And and it's a lot of the same stuff, just not houses so much. And I was like, all right, sounds good to me. So I enrolled at Tulane as a civil engineering major. And I guess for some reason, I declared my major like before I, got there. I go into Tulane, first of all, just without even going to the campus. So I just got on a plane and went to New Orleans.
Right.
I'd never been anywhere in the South before. I'd never really been much of anywhere. It was like a severe culture shock. And I just remember being freaked out, kind of. And then on top of it, I had all these classes that were just heavy math and sciences. Right. I was like, oh, what have I done? So
during that time when you were down there, you didn't get a real good experience of what New Orleans was about, and the music and all that.
Basically what happened was I stopped going to classes after October.
Started going to Bourbon Street.
And started going to Bourbon Street and drinking and taking a lot of drugs and just feeling really sorry for myself. And I used to just sit in the piano. There was a piano room that you could just go into, and I would just sit in there and play like depressing Jackson Browne songs because I was feeling so, out of place. I remember calling my parents, telling them that when I was coming home for, Thanksgiving break, that I didn't want to go back. I was like, this isn't working. I don't like it. And they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I had kind of started thinking that maybe I want to, get into recording, be in the studio. Like, I don't want to be in a band because I'm not that good.
So you were aware of that if you're going to get into music.
I just liked that idea. I knew about, what an engineer was just because you listen to all those Beatles records and, you can't not be aware of what a role the producer and the engineer play in those records. So I had an interest in it already. And like, well, can you get a degree in that? I said, I don't know. But we looked into it because they wanted me to get a degree without a doubt.
Right.
And so after I came back, and I basically never went back, I didn't even finish the semester. Then I found out about Berklee, that it was one of the few that had just had a new recording program there. It was like a year old, and they offered a degree in it. So
what year is this?
This is 80. I graduated high school in 81. So this is probably like 82. And then I got accepted and started in 83. So I had about a year and a half kind of off after high school before going to Berklee.
And this hit all the right notes for you.
Once I got there, it was like,
you've got the music, you've got the technical side. It's all coming together.
As soon as I got there, and I was, I just, it was like, this is it. And
heaven.
The longer, I was fortunate that one of my roommates, because I had two roommates off the get-go, but one was like a really, really great musician, serious kind of composer. He was also just a very disciplined guy, right? And he would like get up every morning and go to the gym and go play racquetball, and then he would practice on the piano for 3 hours and then go have his lunch and go back and practice another 3 hours. And
what was that guy's name?
His name's Chuck Butler. And
Chuck Butler.
It was like, oh, this guy's really serious about this. I need to be as serious. And Chuck wasn't the only guy. There's a lot of guys who are really serious. And I realized the amount of work that they were putting in. There's no time for just hanging out, having fun. And so we would stay up till like 2-3 o'clock in the morning every night making recordings. So he would like write something and, we would record it, and we had more noise on the tapes than actual notes. But it was, it was a big learning process. And I used to get real serious about it. I had like mixing sheets because I had to do, when it was time to mix, I'd have to make all these panning and volume moves and EQ adjustments. And I would have this little sheet that said, okay, at the intro, you have to take track 4 and pan it to the left. And then at the second verse, you have to pan this guitar track to the right and turn this up. And
that's the way it used to be on records.
That's what it was.
That's how that's when we started. It was like that. We'd have all hands on deck on the board, and everybody would have.
We weren't taking notes though.
This is pre-automation, and it was fun. And then so you're just kind of doing it. And then you'd listen back to see if you kind of hit it or not. You know?
Every mix was a performance.
Every mix was a performance. Exactly right. And you're like, oh, I can do it better. Let me do it again.
Yeah, you'd make these passes.
Right. You just do it over and over again and be like, okay, that's the one.
See, isn't it interesting now? I mean, it's like people that are starting out, there's none of that is going to go on. Everything's on your computer.
You got everything.
And all the sounds, you can sound exactly like any record you want to sound like. It's all in there for you already. It's like in those days, you had to experiment. You had to get creative. And I think that's a better way to get into this thing than just be able to
really want it. It was really a great experience. And a lot of it has stuck since
for sure.
Since graduating.
You put it into use all the time.
Absolutely.
In your work. So how did you get from, you ended up back in New York City, right? That's where you ended up starting your professional career.
So when I graduated from Berklee, Boston had a pretty good music scene in the 80s.
Totally.
But so some guys were sticking around there. I was like, I'm going back to New York because my thinking was, you're trying to get a big break. I'm going to get a bigger break if I'm in New York because that's where all the big records were made.
Right.
I lived in New York. So I went back to New York, and I thought that living on Staten Island for some reason might be convenient because it's actually in New York City.
Right.
But that was
it's a ferry ride away from everything that you want to do. Right?
It would take 2 hours to get in every day, on a good day. But anyway, I started at the Hit Factory as a runner and kind of worked my way up. But I was like right in the middle of.
So you're getting coffee at the Hit Factory.
Yeah. when I was there, Keith Richards was making the Expensive Winos record.
Nice.
Billy Joel, Cyndi Lauper, Hall & Oates. One of my first sessions as an assistant was on Brian Wilson's solo record.
Wow.
Yeah.
And those days, being an assistant, I mean, do you get to touch the tape machine, or is that part of it, or is it just running and doing errands?
Yeah, no, running the tape machine and keeping notes, and you know.
Are you punching in at all or not?
You know what? Probably not, from what I remember, just because I was assisting for one of the other assistants who was now engineering kind of thing.
That's how that was the progression of things.
Right. That's how it was a great way to, you know, it was like it came out of that apprenticeship kind of hierarchy. But the idea was you start as a runner, then you do that for like a year, whatever, and you start learning all the stuff that happens in the studio and how to be cool about everything. Then I graduated to the tape library. So back then it was only tape, and there were a lot of them. Like the Rolling Stones or Bruce Springsteen would have 200 2-inch tapes. That would be
that's the
on
record.
session. That would be normal, actually, because they recorded everything and they don't throw anything away.
Right.
And so those 200 tapes had to go in and out of the tape locker, which was not really a locker. It was an attic. That was like, I had to like pull them up one at a time, put them into this attic that, you know, had a lock on it, keep track of them with this card system, and
very hands-on, physical.
You had to know where every tape was, where it had been, logging it in every time it came from, you know, if they were over at Power Station doing some overdubs, and now all the tapes are coming over to do more overdubs at Hit Factory, all those tapes had to be logged in. And
now all you do is press save.
Yeah, exactly. Now the guy brings in a hard drive that's on a thumb drive in his pocket. You don't even know, you know, what's there. So that was a big, you know, it was a lot of responsibility kind of too, because, you know, I used to haul tapes just all over Manhattan.
Right. How do you graduate from that into engineering?
You put in your dues. And I just started assisting when I got fired.
Oh, you got fired.
I got fired from the Hit Factory. You want to hear that?
Yeah,
story?
of course.
Okay. Yeah. I'm happy to tell this story. So, you know, so they would have these sessions like where one of the other assistants is now getting a shot at sitting in the driver's seat. So they would engineer. And there was a big producer at the time named Eric Thorngren, E.T. Thorngren. He did a lot of all those Power Station records, and Robert Palmer, Addicted to Love, and the Talking Heads record. And they said, okay, E.T.'s, I don't know, cousin or brother-in-law or something is coming in for a session on a Sunday, right? So very low key, just some, I think it was just some overdubs. Maybe a couple of musicians, I don't even remember. But at the end of the session, you know, everything went well. I'm just kind of being mellow and stuff. And at the end of the session, the guy comes in. He was kind of like a New York guy, you know. He's like, "Hey, good job, kid!" Right? And he shakes my hand, and he puts $100 bill in my hand.
He duped you,
right?
Yeah, he duped him a C note.
I was like, "Fantastic! This is great. I love us." Yeah. So the next day, so you know, now it's Monday, and I'm back to just being the runner, and I was helping one of the other assistants do a recall, right? So we're just sitting there turning knobs. I'm like, "Hey, Roger, you ever get a tip?" And he goes, "Yeah, once in a while, you know, somebody will give you a tip or they'll give you a gift of some kind." I said, "Yeah, this guy gave me $100 last night." And he was like, "Man, I never got $100 before, right?" You know. So anyway, I just going about the rest of my day, and all of a sudden, as I'm walking around, people like, "Troy's looking for you." Troy was this owner's son, studio manager. Okay. "Troy's looking for you. Troy's looking for you. Hey, did you see Troy? He's looking for you, right?" So, shit, what's going on? And I walk in, and Troy sits me down. He says, "Where's that money?" I say, "What do you mean?" "The money. You know what money I'm talking about. Where's the money?" I realized he's talking about the $100. Like, "The tip?" And that wasn't a tip. That was our money. That was my money. That's not your money. $100 to me was like
that's
a week's pay. You know, I mean, I was probably getting about that in a week. You know, maybe $150. So, and we, you know, and me and my girlfriend, who I was living with, when I came home that night, I told her, she was like, "Great, that'll pay for this and that," you know. So that went out the door as soon as we were done. So I was like, "Oh, okay, I didn't know." You know, I said, "I don't have it, but I'll bring it tomorrow." So it was, you know, the cash part of it was gone. So the next day I came in and I gave him a check, and he was like, "You can't give me a check. Here, what is this? You can't go out and don't come back till you got $100 cash." And I remember it was pouring rain. And, you know, I didn't have $100 cash in my bank account, right? So I had to call my girlfriend and say, I got to give that money to the studio. Can you come and so she drove in from New Jersey where she worked and gave me the money in the pouring rain. I remember I was out in like Times Square. It was pouring. So anyway, I come back. I give him the money. He's like, okay, good. Right. And then from that point on, I was back onto the phones.
Oh yeah.
And I was no longer, I had been on the list. They put out this big board that would say who's going to assist for what sessions were coming up. And I remember I was on, this was going to be the first session that I was on as an assistant from day one, a Joan Jett record, right?
Wow.
That was, it was big in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
And I kind of knew her and her people just from being there because they always worked at the Hit Factory.
Super
So I
New
was
York.
like, oh, this will be cool. This guy, Kenny Laguna, he was cool. And all of a sudden I look up at the board and my name is off there. And the runner who was beneath me was up on the board. I was like, oh,
It's not looking good.
not looking good. and I'm telling you, working the phones at the Hit Factory at that point was unbelievably nightmarishly difficult.
Really?
It was just impossible. It was a feat. You were a nervous wreck. Just what you'd sit there waiting because first of all, you had to buzz. There were these two doors, one that went towards the studios in the back and another one in the corner. And every time they stayed locked. And so every time somebody wanted to go in and out of that, you had to buzz them in while you were on the phone, while you were writing down somebody's lunch order, while you were getting out the petty cash to pay for the lunch order, while the delivery guy was coming in saying, I have tapes from, but right, buzz, 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 buzz me. It was a nightmare.
Wow.
Yeah. And they were really trying to make me quit. And I was just like, I'm not quitting. And I did that for another, 2 months or whatever. Finally, he just said, this isn't working out. I'm going to have to let you go. I was like, is this because of the money?
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's just not working out. It's just not working out. So that was the end of the Hit Factory.
Right.
Wow.
But
brutal.
It was brutal. And I was like, I remember, so I came in on a Saturday to get my last check. I just was severely like down. I was like, what am I going to do? And I'm coming down the stairs onto 54th Street. And just as I walk out the door, I bump into this guy named Reiner Michaelis, who had been a tech at the Hit Factory, who had left a couple of months before that.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "Oh, Dave, how are you doing? What's going on?" I was like, "Well, actually, I just got fired. I'm just picking up my last check. I don't know what I'm doing." And he goes, "Oh, you should come to talk to Charles at Soundworks, which is right across the street, literally across the street next to Studio 54. Because I put in a good word for you. We need someone. The engineer is moving up, so we need a new guy." So I go into the Soundworks the next day for an interview. And I just remember walking into the room and there's just a wall unlike the Hit Factory, this studio had every piece of outboard gear you could ever imagine. And I just remember he said, "You see all that? You know all that?" And I just said, "Yeah, I know all of it." I didn't know half of it, right? But I was like, I need this job, right? So he gave me the job and I started working there as an assistant right from the get-go. And I still had not only assisted a couple of times, really.
So what's the session that like really kind of starts your career?
Actually, a couple of months later after that, I was assisting on a session and the guy just loved me. And he was like, "Hey, you know what? You want to finish these mixes for me? Because I got to go to a wedding on the weekend and I still got 3 more to do." And he let me mix like 3 songs. And I still didn't even know how to really run the automation on the SSL. But they came out good and he liked them. And like all of a sudden, I was like an engineer. Mm-hmm. So, it just ended up going well there. And they had 2 clients there. This is back in the days of dance remixes. Every song that was on the radio basically had a dance remix done. Right. So this guy, Shep Pettibone, who was like the top guy at the time, and this other guy named Teddy Riley, who was just starting to become a big hotshot producer. He was in a band called Guy, and he had just produced Bobby Brown's My Prerogative, which was just getting massive radio airplay as I started working with him, right? These 2 guys kept me busy, and I was literally just sleeping on the couch almost every night.
And working on heavy kind of R&B, kind of dance kind of stuff.
Dance records and R&B. Teddy was more R&B, what became known as New Jack Swing, which was like a phrase he coined and a kind of style that he invented, which was kind of a meld of hip-hop and R&B. And really influential, and it was a really hot thing at the time,
But what did you? This wasn't really your kind of. I mean, this is not music that you grew up on. You didn't
not the Beatles. That, I was listening to, everything else in the 80s. Like I loved Phil Collins and, you know, the Police and Elvis Costello and U2 and stuff like that.
But you had a feel for this, obviously, or could provide what he was looking for.
What I liked about it is that in this remix situation, the mix was where the arrangement happened. You were like making arrangements by muting, taking things on and off on the faders, right? And you could turn a 4-minute pop song into a 7-minute, 8-minute dance remix where there was all these effects and crazy bass lines and drum patterns and stuff. And so,
Phil, wait a second. For 1 second. We got to stop. That was a record scratch stop moment for me. Phil, he actually is adding stuff to songs back then.
Right. Making things longer.
Making it longer. Oh my God.
That was the idea. That was the purpose. Yes. But
the 12-inch.
Right. Yeah, that was the idea. Everything was an extended thing so that they would play it in the clubs.
Right.
For, you know.
And, this is for dance purposes, dance club purposes.
But they also played them on the radio too. And pretty much, at least with Chet, for most of these, with Chet Pettibone for sure, we would always do a remixed single version, right? So it would be a short, like a good example is the Madonna song, Express Yourself.
Yeah.
Where there was the album version, but then when we did the remix, we did a single length version with all these new drums and new bass parts and new keyboards and all that stuff. And
so you're remixing Madonna songs at this point?
Well, yeah. Shep kind of got the top of the top project. So you'd be doing whatever.
Huge.
Madonna, Paula Abdul, Janet Jackson.
But artists wouldn't necessarily be involved in it.
No, this was very much kind of, it was the record companies would just.
This is just like an assembly line of
and we would be one of like 5 guys who were doing remix. There would be like 5 remixes going on, right? And they would either sometimes use multiple ones or just choose one of them and say, oh, we like that guy's.
So let's talk a little bit about this R&B influence and what you're doing, because, you know, we're a rock and roll thing and you've grew up on rock and roll, but there is this R&B element to your experience anyway. Does it play into what you do with a rock and roll band like us at all? Is there any kind of connection there?
I think there is. I remember when we did the first 7Horse record, when it was basically just drums and guitar and vocals.
Right.
So there was all this room on the bottom for just like kick drum, you know, and it does tend to all those kind of R&B or even pop records where the drums are so much the driving force, because for the most part, rock records, the guitars are the driving force, you know?
Right.
And so those are the things that push the track forward.
Right. It's about shaking your ass.
Yeah. So whatever. So it's kind of that combination, and 7Horse has all this room for both, you know, so you could have the drums really loud and the guitars really loud, you know, because there's no bass in there really and no keyboards and stuff. So that's, you know, that was a lot of fun. I remember just getting off on just like, wow, all this room on the bottom for just nothing but kick drum.
That was always appealing to me, because I'm always looking to try to get people moving, you know, not just listening, but moving with our music. And from the get-go with you, it had this bumping bottom end that to me relates directly to your R&B kind of approach that was really appealing to what we're doing.
Before we get too far away from that moment in our lives, dude, I mean, that was a seismic event. Hearing your mixes
for sure.
of I mean, it was not just hey, those are pretty good. It took 3 days to absorb it and go, is this who we could be?
Right. Well, that
was like,
absolutely
holy
true.
crap.
You know, because what we thought we made when we brought you that first record, Let the 7Horse Run, we thought we made kind of a homemade, down home kind of feeling record that was going to be simple and unadorned with a lot of
organic.
Yeah, that was our whole approach. Then we brought it in here and gave it to you, and and when we heard it back, it was kind of like, wait a minute.
This got hit with that New Jack Swing.
This thing went in a whole other direction, and we weren't so sure that we could get behind it, you know, right away. It took, and as we progressed through the second one and the third one, we got not only more used to that, but looking forward.
We have to have it. Yeah.
That when we give it to you, it's going to come back and be something totally different than what we thought we had, which was great, and got better and better. We realized that you were becoming a bigger and bigger part of what we sounded like. That once we didn't really sound like what we were going to sound like until you got your hands on it.
Exactly.
And that became a big part of our whole thing. And it still is that way today. you've produced us from the ground up. You've also obviously mixed everything we've done.
Yep.
And whatever way we're doing it, it really is like that final stage when you're going to get your hands on it and mix it. That's when it really becomes like what 7Horse is going to sound like. So I did want to ask you though, if you're some artists you produce, some people you just mix, some you do both. With us, it's been both. What's the difference for you in getting your hands on a project at the ground floor level or getting into it later? And, you can talk about it with us or with anybody that you've worked with.
It's funny because I was doing this remix stuff kind of from the beginning. I got into mixing like first almost. It was just that the timing in the 80s and 90s, there was so much like drum machine stuff being kind of at the front, where I didn't record drums really in a professional studio for like 10 years
Right.
into my career.
It was a bad time for drummers.
Yeah, there was pretty much all drum machines and samplers and stuff.
Yeah.
So the mixing thing has always been like something that I've just loved to do and gotten into. And so I love mixing, and really didn't have too much interest in producing. When I was young, I wanted to produce more. But then when I just got into mixing, I was like, this is the best gig ever. Like what you described as the reaction of like, wow, this is what it is now.
Right.
I always loved that, because that was the kind of reaction I was always trying to get out of people. It's like, wow, I didn't think it was this great. You know what I mean? Like, now this sounds like a single. So that's always a great reaction. And that's kind of what you're striving for. The producing stuff kind of didn't happen until just a bit more recently, like maybe 10 years ago or whatever. But what I found was, now that I went through so many different styles of music, that it's all of a sudden musicians and real drums and real instruments started to come back again.
Right.
And I realized how much I love recording a great band, and how much of it is made when we're actually capturing something,
Right.
when guys are playing in the room together. That's a whole different kind of magic. And so I really started to get into that. And I was like, I want to do this more,
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of one of the ways to do that was to just produce, and then mix it when I was done.
Right.
So I was getting both of it. What I started to really like about producing was now getting a bit more involved in the song arrangement and structure, and just
This is where the giant pair of scissors comes in
yeah,
handy.
exactly. We're like, we could, because normally I would do that maybe in a mix. I was
Right.
like, I tried a different edit here, see if you like this. I cut out these 4 bars, or
I mean,
snap the intro.
that experience of that phenomenon of bringing a song in that you, as an artist, that you think is nailed down. When somebody like you comes and says, no, you don't want to do that 8 times, you want to do it 4 times or whatever. That is a hard thing sometimes for the artist to even get behind. Do you find that is the same case? No, it's not just us, right?
No,
that's what I'm driving.
no, definitely too. And, for sure. You're dealing with people's, babies. You know what I mean? Some people are a lot more sensitive to it than others, but for the most part, in general, this is kind of sacred ground here, and you don't go to it lightly. You want to kind of have a good idea, a good feeling that your suggestion is going to make it better.
I think the more you've done it as an artist, the more you've been in that situation as a recording artist, the easier it gets.
Right.
I remember I used to be more offended in the old days.
Actually,
like, what? How dare you?
Right. Right.
Well, it takes over time. You start to trust the person's taste more, and you realize that person, in your case, with us, you've got a perspective on it that we don't have because we're maybe a little too close, and that now we've evolved to a point where we're expecting it.
Right. Well, we built that trust through the mixing process, where I would maybe come up with an edit or something like that.
Right.
And we did that a lot. Yeah. It was kind of, And at first it was like, oh, I'm not sure about that. And it's like, oh,
But your whole thing was like, let's
exactly.
live with it.
Live with it. Yeah. The first time you'll hear it back, it's going to sound weird because you're so used to hearing it the other way.
Right. You've listened to a rough mix 100
so
times.
It takes a few listens to let it kind of just marinate and settle in. And then all of a sudden, then it starts to make sense. So
Right.
This
still,
recording thing for you is like, it takes you back to being the kid with the cassette, what you liked about the whole thing in the very beginning.
Yeah, it's very true, Joey. And that I all the stuff that made me excited when I was like 15, 16, being in a band and stuff, I kind of get to do that more now. Every once in a while, I'll play drums or bass or some guitar on a track, which I love to do.
Right.
Now I only do it if I think it's actually gonna be good, or if we have no choice because nobody else is here and I have to do it. But I'm not afraid to do it. Whereas I might have been afraid to even throw that out there 10 years ago. But I've gotten more used to just playing and being around musicians and knowing how to communicate and how to be another musician in the room too,
Right.
So I think it's kind of a subconscious kind of thing, but it's just a feel thing that feels more comfortable.
Speaking about a feel thing, I'm starting to get the connection because you mentioned going back to your dad and the barbershop thing, but your feel and approach to doing backing vocals and group vocals is a unique thing. I don't want to give away all the secrets here because we have a couple of secrets here. We have a couple. There's a couple of things that we've done with you that I never did before.
Really?
Yeah. And you always have an approach. You have an approach to cutting gang vocals that creates an atmosphere on our records that is very unique.
By the way, Dave has sang on our records.
You have, yeah, you have.
Right.
You've sung a lot of stuff, because we do a lot of. On Superfect, it really started there because that was the one that you produced, and we've carried that on. Whether you're on the session or not, we're doing it now. We bring it to you; it's already done. We'll do
every song has gang vocals.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah,
but this is getting into the weeds a little bit. But I know there's going to be some musicians listening to this. That not everything always has to be perfectly in tune. Not everything has to be completely in sync. Not everything has to be lined up perfectly. The phrasing of everything. Not everybody has to say the same words at exactly the same time. It gets a little bit. We find ways to create some atmosphere in this thing. Where did that idea come from? To do it, because you would think that everything should be locked up as tight as it can be, that people should sing completely together, that if you're going to do 3 people singing, they all have to phrase it exactly the same way.
But you're talking about like the Frankenstein.
Yeah, all that stuff and how loose it is, which is against kind of instinct about trying to make things sound perfect.
Right. Yeah, if you have a couple of tracks that are really good and in tune and the right words and all that stuff, then you can throw some other kind of sloppy ones. And some of them, I mean, we'll do a track, what we call Frankenstein track, where it's just like, what is America? It's just, everybody sounds like Phil Hartman on Saturday Night Live.
Right.
But, you just add those in a little bit, another technique, just techniques you pick up over the years, like, sometimes, a girl wants a sexy vocal or something, and you just have a track of whispering, and there's no tone to it, but it's just the feeling and the
it creates, and this is something that I'm always talking about this with our music, and people have mentioned this to us, that we have this kind of cinematic quality and to the music. And to me, I'm always looking to try to create a thing that you not only can listen to, it's in a place. A sort of surreal quality. We're trying to make it a little bit like super reality. It's bigger than life in a lot of ways. And I think that kind of stuff.
Super reality is a good word. That's a good word. And then another one that goes along what you were saying about the background vocals, that Sam Phillips, from Sun Records quote is to strive for the imperfectly perfect.
Right.
To where it's got its own kind of perfection that not everything's right, but it just feels right.
I mean, listen to all those great records you listen to, or even the ones that, you got into when you got older. There's stuff all over those records that are mistakes.
And you start to love all the mistakes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to do those, though.
Well, particularly for engineering types like myself, but I think I've pretty much shed a lot of that stuff from me, which is, to make everything perfect and in its place and stuff, it's like, you got to embrace that stuff and not be afraid, when you like it, just say, no, that's great. We're not getting rid of that.
We hit that all the time in performances too, that it happens a lot where we think we've made a mistake and you're like, no, that thing is
There's
good,
something about it sometimes. And those end up very often becoming your favorite parts of the record.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Who was ever going to tell Joe Cocker that at the end of You Are So Beautiful, like
Oh,
where
yeah.
he barely squeaks that out.
Right.
But it is the best part of the record.
Right.
And, you know, I'm sure somebody in that control room or at the record label said, well, you can't have that. You can't have it. It's like, yes, we
Yeah,
can.
we're
That's
gonna
what we're
have that.
choosing to have that.
Yeah.
It's the best part. Shut up. Yeah.
Let's talk about the Beatles for a second, because this is a band and a topic. And first of all, you come into the Way Station, and there is a lot of Beatles stuff in here. And maybe this is a way to get into it. You know, we like to be here, whether or not you're producing us, because a lot of mixes you'll do on your own, right? You'll send them to people, but we like to come in if we possibly can.
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
And we'll sit here on the couch and just won't say anything for the most part. Every once in a while, we'll get up and come up to the front here where you're sitting at the desk and
point something out.
and ask you about something. But I mean, number one, does that bother you?
Not at all. Because it's kind of, you know, it's easier, but that's like the dream scenario.
Yeah.
Right. Is when you're actually here, but you're just letting me do my thing.
Right.
And we're good enough friends to where I never feel like I have to entertain you or, you know, or let you know that, oh, I'm just doing this right now. It's going to take about 20 minutes. You guys hungry? You know, we can just be.
Yeah. So that's really cool for us too. We love that.
I love
and
that.
one of the things that you get to do here while watching you work is read one of your
Beatles
books.
right.
You've got a fully library of Beatles books and great studio books, great, you know, English recording studios and songwriter books. So we're always, you know, entertained while you're working. We're just sitting here listening.
Maybe we should bring $100 bills.
Yeah. The other thing is very interesting about watching you work. And we've been doing this a long time now. I mean, we started working together in 2007. That's the first thing we worked on.
12 years more.
Yeah, 13 years ago.
That was Jeff Trott connection, right?
Yes, that was
Jeff Trott hooked us up on
the Dada EPs. Yes.
But in watching you work, there's a few interesting things that I've noticed over the years that you do that people that maybe are starting to do this or doing their own work, making their own music might find interesting. And that one is that you move around the room while you're mixing. You don't.
Yes.
The speakers are set up so there's a sweet spot that everybody likes to sit in. Everybody likes to sit in that sweet spot where the speakers are all in, but you don't always sit in the sweet spot. You're in the back of the room. You're in the other room. You go outside.
That's the best one. When you go outside, it's amazing.
Yeah, he's got these spots where you're listening. Now, what is that about?
This room actually sounds pretty uniform through most of it, right? Like, you know, anywhere in this kind of, you know, 6 or 8 foot kind of circle in this sweet spot sounds pretty good. But in any room, as you get more towards the corners, you get a bass buildup and you get to, you know, so it sounds different in the corners. So sometimes if I'm really trying to hear the bass stuff from a different perspective, basically, or just, you know, as if the bass was turned up loud, I can go back into the corners and I'm going to hear more bass, and I'll be able to really zero in on the low frequencies and say, oh, okay, that tom, when it hits, it's going too low. I need to knock off some really low frequencies, or the kick drum and the bass and that kind of stuff.
That's when I usually know we're starting to get close to it.
One of the
start moving around.
Right. That's when I start to I kind of get the general balance and start to and then I'll move towards the corners. The spot by the coffee machine over there is my favorite spot. And then this corner over here by the bathroom, that's another good spot.
And then
in the other room, and then sometimes outside.
Right.
Yeah.
On a side note, and this is I'm going to preface it by saying, is it okay to talk about this? And it's totally cool if it's not. Can we talk about who had this house before you?
Oh, yeah. I bought it from Julian Lennon a long time ago. He had actually already converted this garage into a studio.
Right.
And, you know, I honestly, for the first 5 years I lived here, I really didn't even work in the studio. It wasn't until Riley was born, my daughter, which is, you know, 17, almost 18 years ago, that I decided, oh, maybe it would be good if I worked out of the house more.
Because you had a studio.
Yeah, but that was actually later. But for the most part, I just worked in all the studios around town because back when the music business was just strong, you just, you know, I had a couple of favorites that I like to work in the most, mostly Larrabee and a couple of other places.
So you get a project and then you book some time and go do it.
I would just sit at Larrabee for whatever, most of the year, and just work 3 days this week, 5 days that week, you know, 2 weeks on this project, whatever. Then when my daughter was born, I decided it would be good if I could be around the house more and not away at the studio all the time.
Right.
So I basically just tried to build a studio like Larrabee here at my
Right.
house.
Was that
And,
Pro Tools right away, or?
Well, it was just at the beginning of Pro Tools. This is like 2002. So Pro Tools had been around a couple of years, and I already had a Pro Tools rig that I was taking to all my sessions and charging back to the record companies, because believe it or not, at the very beginning, a lot of the studios did not have Pro Tools rigs.
Pro Tools, for anybody who doesn't know, that's basically it's working within a computer environment at that point.
Right.
You're not working with a tape machine.
All the big studios just still had digital tape machines or analog tape machines.
Right.
So I built my studio here, and then kind of serendipitously, a few years after that, about 2005 or so, it really started. This is, when Napster and the whole digital download era
fiasco
started to take hold. The music business really started to change, and you could see it in the budgets and just all the talk from people in the industry about like how this is going to affect us all. And so I was kind of lucky that I now had a studio that I was comfortable in working with that wasn't an extra $3,000 a day like the record plant would be or something.
So the transition for you wasn't as difficult as it might have been for somebody who wasn't set up ready to go at that point.
Exactly.
Right.
So I was kind of lucky that I was a bit ahead of the curve in that regard.
But I did want to ask you about this, because this is part of this. Our whole idea about this podcast is our approach to navigating the current music business climate and doing it. I mean, it's a fully independent world now for us. I mean, we're not affiliated with any label. You came up doing all label projects. There wasn't much independent music really when you were when you started working, and you've made the transition from being a guy who's getting paid by record labels to a guy who's now
getting paid by the band.
Getting paid by the band, right?
Yeah,
and it's a whole different world in that respect. Talk about what that meant for you and how you were able to navigate that.
Yeah, back in those days, it used to be that you wouldn't want to work for anybody that wasn't on a record label because you were afraid you weren't going to get. That meant that you might not get paid. Right. It's like, oh, that's shady. He's not on a label. I don't know. I don't have time.
Right.
Booked, So working on label stuff was kind of, you had PO numbers and contracts and all this legal stuff and managers, and so there was never an issue. But as things started to change, as it's turned out now, it's kind of very much the opposite, where record labels, it's not that you're not going to get paid by the record labels, but they take like 6 months.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, oh man, I got, I'll do this work and see it in 6 months. That's not easy. And one of the great things about working on independent projects where it's a self-financed band or some other financer behind it, or a small label, you get paid right when it's over. It's like there's no lag. So that makes keeping everything going.
But of course, the money is not what it used to be.
That's the other thing. But at least you get paid that little bit earlier. You have to wait for 6 months.
But this is another thing about you that I wanted to bring up is that around town, and the longer we've known each other, and I've met people that know you and seen when it's your birthday on Facebook or whatever, and having walked into a bar in town called Ireland's 32 where there's a jam every week. I've gone in there with you a few times. I mean, you are one of the most well-liked guys that I know in Los Angeles. Nobody has ever said a bad word about Dave Way. And I think that plays into why you're always working. I mean, that's a big part of it, right? I mean, the personal relationships are a key to keeping this thing going.
Relationships. And I'm lucky that I do have a lot of repeat people like you guys. I've worked with, I can't believe it's been 12 years.
Yeah.
But,
13 years.
13 years.
Jeez.
But I have quite a few of those. And all those people have become, for the most part, some of my best friends, So
that's great.
We hang out all the time.
Yeah, all the time. I mean, that's one of the great pleasures of this whole thing is that we've been able to become friends, go to I know you're a big baseball. Yeah, actually, that's another thing that people don't know is that Dave Way has a vicious forkball. And I actually got him out of the studio and onto the baseball field probably 10 years ago when I was managing a baseball team, and he came out. And this is a guy that doesn't get out of this chair that much.
That lasted one season.
Yeah, but you did throw pretty well. It was pretty impressive. And we do, you're a big fan. a big baseball fan.
We both know.
Yeah.
Yes, we're big Dodger fans in particular.
Right.
Yes, it's a good time.
Yeah, you guys actually dragged me to a Dodger.
We did.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
There'll be more, Joey. Believe me.
So let's go back now to the Fab Four for a second, because this is very influential for me. It's
for both of us.
For both of us,
we know the stories.
Yeah,
and the reasons.
Yeah. But you did work with. We both worked with one of the Beatles.
Yep.
You've worked with two of the Beatles, really. You did a thing with Paul, but the Ringo thing was a little bit more in depth, and we got a chance to sing on a Ringo record. But
before I worked with him, you did.
I think so. But you engineered the whole shebang and got to hang out with him and do a lot with Ringo.
I mixed the first thing. I mean, so both of us obviously are huge Beatles fans.
Yeah, Joey too, of course.
All of us. Yeah,
they're okay.
Yeah.
It was like a dream come true. I just remember I was sitting in a studio reading the Music Connection, which was like this industry magazine.
Local. We know it well.
In the lobby.
Yeah.
And I remember reading this thing that said Ringo Starr is making a record for Koch Records produced by Mark Hudson, right? I just saw it and immediately called my manager and said, "Hey, I see Ringo's making a record with Mark Hudson. I don't know, maybe it's done, maybe they've already mixed it, but maybe they haven't. If they haven't, I want to mix it." So he said, "All right, I'll make some phone calls." And he called me back a half an hour later. He's like, "Okay, you got a meeting with Mark Hudson at Lulu's on Melrose or whatever street it was on." And so I met Mark, and he's another huge Beatles freak.
Well, he thought he was like John Lennon revisited, right?
Exactly.
But super talented guy. But we immediately hit it off, and literally, like I think 2 weeks later, I'm on a plane going to England to stay at Ringo's house for 2 months and work with him on a record at David Gilmour's studio on a boat on the Thames River.
That's insane.
It was just insane. And I just every day was pinching myself. Like, how did I get here?
And did you get into it? Was there discussions about the old days? And does he talk about that stuff?
The first thing you told is like, don't bring up the Beatles unless he's allowed to bring it up. You're not.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it is. But I tell you, man, he couldn't have been cooler. And I mean, he's just the funnest guy, and he was just the best. I can't even get over how cool and how comfortable he made you feel.
Right.
And he would joke around all the time, and then he would tell some Beatles stories. Or like I just remember one time we had a drum kit set up, and I was actually, while we were mixing, we had some instruments and everything set up, and Ringo was behind the drums and he was playing. I was recording him. I was like, I can't believe I'm recording Ringo. And he just is like, "Oh, watch this." And he starts with his, this as a drummer, with one hand, he's just playing swinging eighth notes.
Right.
And then the other hand, he's playing straight eighth notes with,
right.
And that's a very, very, very hard thing to do. But the other thing that struck me when we were recording was us engineers in particular, we love the sound of Ringo's cymbals. Right. And it's just this kind of washy, whoosh, right. And we always chalked it up to the Fairchild compressor, that it was the Fairchild that was sucking the attack and then giving you this, and that's part of it. But I'm telling you, I recorded him without a Fairchild and without even like his cymbals. He was playing Dave Gilmour's drums and cymbals. And when he hit that cymbal, it was like Ringo. You could just knew it. You just knew
it's in the hands.
Yeah. It's just the way he hits it.
Yeah. That's so cool.
I'm telling you, that's the bigger part of it, But it was just a dream come true.
Ringo is obviously a huge name and a legend, and our favorite and whatnot. But I don't know if people saw the documentary Echo in the Canyon that came out last year. You're deeply involved in that, and tell us about.
That was a lot of fun. That was more rock legends to.
Right. Who was on that you got to deal with?
Clapton. I mean, I'm sitting there with Eric Clapton.
Come on, man.
Oh man, and he's just playing a solo on this song that we recorded here, And
what guitar was he playing?
He's playing one of his old Strats, and he started telling us the story about how he put together all of his Strats when he went to Showbud in Nashville in 1972 or something like that, because Hendrix had been playing Strats, and it was probably earlier than 72, I guess. But Strats at that point in 1970. A 57 Strat
wasn't that big of a deal.
It was,
they were around.
An old
13
guitar.
years old. Yeah, it was an old guitar.
Yeah, it was an old guitar.
So what he did was he just went into Showbud and bought all the Strats that were in there, probably for $200 a piece or something. And he started putting them together in weight, just a neck from this one. Oh, I like this body and these pickups and this one.
Wow, that's
and
cool.
Yeah, that's how Brownie and Blackie came to be. And then he used to, and then I gave one to Pete Townsend, and I gave one to Steve Winwood, and I gave one to Bob Dylan. As he was telling Jacob, I gave one to your dad.
Right.
And,
During those times when you're around these kind of legendary people, is it hard to, being cool in that situation?
It's a little
is
hard,
it hard
to be cool sometimes, but yeah,
you got to do it.
You got to do it.
Got to be.
What was the hardest? Was Ringo the hardest to be cool around for you?
I don't know, because I tell you, some of them are. I think and Eric was the same way. Couldn't have been nicer. These guys have been dealing with fame for so long, and they're so used to people kind of freaking out.
Yeah.
And we're in the studio and stuff, so it's a little different than just regular fans who are like,
right.
"Oh, I love you, I've seen you." And
of course, when I got next to Ringo, that's exactly what I did. I did not. I was not cool. I let it out.
But he was probably nice about
totally
it. Right?
Cool.
Exactly.
Totally cool.
It's been 50 years of that, so they know exactly how to deal with it and make you feel it.
And then I got in front of Barbara Bach after that, his wife, and I was laying it out for her. I was like, look, I just, we were at the Village recording, and he was standing right next to me before we were about to cut this group vocal, one of these gang vocals. And there he's standing next to me. And I was like, listen, I got to tell you, I figured this might be my only shot. Right. And I've been thinking about Ringo Starr every day of my life since I was, 5 years old, literally. Yeah. He's on my mind.
Yeah. He's why you're a drummer.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. It set me on a course for my whole life. So there he is, and I'm laying all this out, and he's like, take it easy, it's all right. And so then after that's all over, I go in, and there's Barbara Bach in the control room, and so I'm feeling pretty bold. I'm gonna go in there and say hello. So I go in. She's by herself. I go in there and I say, listen, I just let it all out on your husband. And she was like, oh, he loves that kind of stuff. He loves to hear from guys who were influenced.
He loves drummers. He loves musicians.
Exactly. She was like, when Bono came to the house, he did the exact same thing.
Right,
so don't worry about it.
I'm sure that. Yeah, exactly. The biggest of the big.
Yeah.
Everybody
does that with Ringo. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to.
So you stay cool. I don't know how. And definitely, Neil Young was a little bit more, because Neil is not so warm and fuzzy to make you feel at ease.
I smoked a joint with Neil Young.
Really?
I was just going to say,
that's a good story.
I did, yeah. I was up in San Francisco at a studio. He's in I see the door open. He's in there with Crazy Horse. Really? And it's like the door's open, he's there, and he was actually out in the lobby too. They were coning his ears. He was getting the wax. And I had some weed on me. I'm like, I wonder if Neil Young would want to get high with me. And so I marched in there. I'm like, hey man, you want to smoke this joint? And he's like, yeah.
Wow. That's
cool.
Awesome. Really?
Yeah.
Did you talk at all?
Not really.
Really? Yeah.
I had a few puffs, and that was it. I was like, okay, see you, man.
Wow.
It was cool.
For the most part, I think, particularly the older guys, Mick Jagger worked with him. He was pretty, again, just like super nice and cool, and they know how to make you feel
on a solo record.
I was just going to say, is that a solo record?
Oh yeah, the one that's called "Goddess in the Doorway," I think it's called, or something like that.
In New York City.
No, this was here at the record plant in L.A. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I do have to talk to you about one other big name, because I know we're getting down to it for you.
Yeah.
But I know you worked with Michael Jackson.
Yes.
And there's so much.
That one was a weird one.
Yeah.
At the very first.
Believe it.
Yeah. I just remember, the first time I met him was kind of by accident, because we came out here to LA. I was working with that producer I mentioned, Teddy Riley. And, we came out to LA, and I went to the studio like the night before we were supposed to start, to just kind of get the lay of the land and take a look around and see what we would need and stuff. And so I'm just sitting in the control room on probably a Sunday night or something. And the door opens and Michael Jackson walks in, and he's startled to see me because he didn't think anybody was in the room. And I was like, he's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was in there. I was like, no, I'm sorry, Michael, I'm Dave. I'm going to work with you tomorrow. But just from a physical standpoint, when Michael Jackson walks into the room, it's like the room just changed.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Totally. Even if Ringo walks, he just kind of looks like a normal guy. He acts a bit more like a normal guy. Right. Michael, not so much, And so, and he's very shy, so he's not exactly so great at making you feel, but he's super polite.
What kind of as a vocalist, what are your thoughts about him?
You know, without a doubt, the best singer I've ever recorded. And I've been fortunate to record some pretty great singers, Whitney Houston and, you know.
Right. What about him was
he's just so great. I mean, all right. The first time I recorded him, we'd been working for a couple of weeks, maybe a week or so. And there was a song called Remember the Time that was just a track at that point, but they knew that the chorus was going to be Remember the Time. So they had that and like, well, let's just put that down. So Michael's like, okay, I'll go record. Now, back in the 90s, it was very common, still is common. We you know, you basically do one chorus and then you kind of quote unquote cut and paste it into the other choruses, right? We didn't have Pro Tools back then. And so it was a bit of a laborious way of doing it with offsetting tape machines and then putting it onto flying it into another one. But so it would take a while to do, but we did it. That was kind of the normal way of doing it, particularly in R&B records, right? So we're going to record this chorus vocal. And I said, so shall we just go to the first chorus? And he's like, no, you can just start it at the top. I said, okay. So I just started at the top and we only need, you know, one chorus. And we get to the end. He sings the first part and it's great. We get to the end and I stop. He says, well, why'd you stop? I was like, oh, sorry, we're just doing the choruses. I just thought we'd just, you know, do this first one and fly it in. And he's like, I have no idea what you're doing. He's just looking at me like, what? He's like, no, just keep me going. You know, I was like, okay. So, you know, pick it up from there. And he does the second chorus and then the third chorus. And he's like, okay, let's do the next track. Okay. Go to the top. And he's like, you know, he's just getting in the mood and you can hear him stomping his feet and stuff and maybe a little snap every here and there. And he doubles his first track like perfectly, just like every breath, every consonant perfectly in sync, in tune. And then he gets to the second chorus and it's just a little bit different, maybe a little more intense. Third chorus again, a little more, right? And then, you know, we go through this of doing now a harmony and another double. And we probably did like, you know, whatever, 8, 9, 10 tracks of just these vocals. Maybe punching in once or twice, right?
Just laying it down. And they're just perfect.
Right. And we're done in like 20 minutes, right? And meanwhile, if we had done it the other way where we would record, you know, 8,
for
10,
hours.
Yeah, then that'd be another hour at least of me flying it all in. And I'm looking at it, I was like, man, we just did that in 20 minutes. I don't have to do anything. And it sounds amazing. You know, I'm like, why don't I do this all the time? And then I just say to him, well, it's because we're not recording Michael Jackson every day. You know? It's like nobody else can do that really. It was just perfect. And he would never record his vocal until he was like in the right frame of mind. And it was a performance. It was always a performance. So
even like the stuff in between, like
everything. And one of the other things he said, don't erase the breaths, because, you know, engineers would tend to, you know, spot erase all the breaths and
clean it all up.
Yeah, take out some of the like all that stomping. You listen to any Michael Jackson vocal and you hear this, you know, in the background, but it's always perfectly in time. It sounds part of the track.
It's all it's all part of his plan. Going in.
So he knows exactly what he's doing and what he wants, and he wouldn't do a vocal until he was kind of ready to do it. Right. You know?
Now there's been a lot of, obviously he's a controversial figure. I mean, there's, you know, a lot of the accusations against him are pretty legendary at this point. And some people won't even listen to his music anymore because of it. And I don't want to gloss over that because, I mean, it's a thing, you know, it's out there.
But whatever people want to do, that's fine. Yeah.
But in that room that day, listening to it go down, it was a pretty amazing bit of artistry.
Oh, man. Yeah. You know, he was always trying to make something extra cool and pushing everybody to do something more special, you know what I mean? Like and pushing himself. But yeah, this was on the Dangerous album. This is kind of before a lot of this kind of darkness came, you know, and it was just a fantastic experience for all of us. It was like just amazing. That and the Ringo experience are just two of the best experiences in the studio for me, for sure.
And they make you want to be better yourself.
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, you know, particularly at that time, you know, well, any time for Michael Jackson, but he was like the top, you know what I mean? It's like, you just felt like this is the major leagues. This is the World Series. You know,
Right,
it's like,
right,
I got to bring my
right.
best game. You know,
Right.
and
Totally.
and same thing with Ringo. I mean,
Right.
I honestly, I really do try and treat every project like that. Every 7-Horse record, I'm like, this is the World Series, damn it. You know?
Okay, cool.
No, I mean, I honestly really do try and give everything I got to every record.
Well, I think
you know?
there's no doubt that's how we feel about what we've gotten from you. I mean, I've never had I've never heard a mix where I thought, he was kind of phoning that in. I never have experienced that, not once.
Because you know, I'm never satisfied.
No.
I'm always going back and think, oh, this is,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, that's one thing about Davis. You get a mix, and then maybe like you're on your way home. It's been a 10-hour day. You've been here all day long. You've been working on it, sitting here listening and playing back, and then finally, okay, we're done. And maybe we've gone out and listened to it in the car. And all right, that's it. Good night.
Then it's like, what's the over under on?
Well, it's always, I mean, within, half hour, 45 minutes, another one comes in the email. So
you're
exactly. Obviously a perfectionist in your own right, trying to get it just to the way it feels exactly right. And honestly, it always seems to get just a little bit better.
Just a little bit is all you need. Just whatever. You know, every time
you
listen to it again, it's like, oh, I'm just going to turn this one thing up here. Oh, yeah. So sometimes, just a change in perspective can spark an idea, and then you want to go with that idea rather than the one that you had initially.
Here's something that we didn't touch on at all that we do need to at least mention.
What?
We got 4 Grammys in this room. Okay.
Nice.
Now, I remember walking in here the first time, and I knew you had won some Grammys, and I came in here and I'm looking around. I'm like, where are these Grammys at? And then I realized that he's got the Grammys up on top of a cabinet in the corner of the room in an area that they cannot be seen really by the naked eye unless you're looking for them.
You got to look for them.
And I was always like, man, if they were my four Grammys, they'd be sitting on the console. So that when you came in, that'd be the first thing. But just briefly, because I know you have to go, the experience of winning the Grammy. I mean, the Grammys are full of controversy, especially now. But I think that on the technical side, it's less so than on the artistic side, because it's more your peers are just voting for the people that get to vote on engineering Grammys are engineers, right?
Right. Well, for the most part, the nomination process kind of is, it only kind of goes through the engineering.
But I mean, what was that like for you? Was that exciting?
In particular, it's really nice when you get recognized in the engineering categories, you know. You know what, it's nice. I mean, it's honestly very true when they just say it's a privilege just to be nominated or whatever. It's just it really is. It's the most fun. Like we were nominated for kind of one of those technical ones this last year for what they call immersive audio, and so they announced those in the pre-telecast ceremony, and starts at like 12:30, and we were getting there really late. And we were afraid we were going to miss it because you don't know what order they're going to announce them in. So we get in and we're sitting down for about 10 minutes, and I'm with the artist who's also up for it, obviously. And our category came up and we lost. And, I've lost quite a few like that. So I don't get too excited about it when it happens, because it only makes that moment of, now what do we do? You know what I mean? It's like, it's 1:00.
Right.
Oh, all the wind is out of our sails. And
start drinking.
Exactly. That's what you do. You go to the you watch a couple of more performances or whatever, and then you go have a couple of drinks.
Yeah.
And try and have fun the rest of the night. Right. After a while, you forget it. You're like, but it's the anticipation part of it that's kind of the most fun, But it's nice to have the trophies.
Yeah,
but
trophies are cool.
Yeah,
totally. It always makes me happy when I'm in here and I get to see them. It's like, at least I'm in the room with a guy who won 4 Grammys. It's exciting. All right, Dave. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate this time.
This was fun.
All right. Great talking to Dave, wasn't it?
Fantastic. He's a great guy, very smart man, and very talented, and has a lot of great stories.
He does, man. So some time has elapsed here since we put the front half of the podcast together to now where we are. We were kind of joking around at the outset about you being up at Coronavirus Central. Yeah.
Yes.
But it turns out that's not exactly the case anymore. Well, I mean, it kind of still is, but it's everywhere.
Right.
And we're in the middle of a true global pandemic. I know how life has changed down here. Last night, the mayor got on television and basically shut down all restaurants, bars, the gyms. Everything has kind of come to a grinding halt. And I know it's the same for you up there, and probably is coming to everybody in the country.
Yeah,
I feel like we're going to survive this thing. Life is going to go on, but it is going to be interrupted here for a bit.
definitely.
And, it's a different world than it was a week ago.
Yeah, and I have a feeling the following week is going to be different from this week.
Yeah,
So
probably so.
just I feel like I'm for some reason I feel like I'm ready for it, but maybe because it's been going on here for a while, so my head's
Right.
wrapped around it. But man, it is a beautiful day
Is
right
it?
now. Right
Great.
now. Oh
So you
my
can
God.
still go outside. You can actually go outside.
You
Yeah,
can, and
that's
and
still that.
right now the air, the oxygen up here is just phenomenal.
Oh, that's
I mean,
cool. It's raining cats and dogs down here.
oh,
Um,
so that's good. I mean, it cleans out the air
right.
when that comes down there.
So let's talk about the 7 Horse Nation and the 7 Horse, the band. Put it in perspective. It is going to affect our plans a little bit. It
I,
looks like.
yeah, we should, yeah, I think so. I've been kind of, trying to keep it at a 50-50
Right.
rate, but I don't know, man. I think it's moving.
Because
I
you
don't
were going to
know.
come down here. You were going to come back down to LA. We're going to get back in the studio the first week of April.
Yep.
And now that seems to be in doubt. Although we did discuss yesterday before it kind of went to this level that, there's a certain thing about a crisis time. And wouldn't it be interesting to be in a creative situation during one of these kind of crises, that the energy of all that might find its way into the art, which would be interesting, but I just don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off. We certainly can write on our own and get back together. And I mean, I'm sure that this whole experience is going to have some effect on what we do with our music down the road,
Oh
whether or
yeah.
not.
No. The music doesn't stop. It's just
Yeah.
that particular recording
Right.
session might get moved.
Yeah. And we're going
Um,
to, and then the cool thing is that we're going to be able to continue to do podcasts during this time, because we have this ability to be in different places and, as we are right now, and keep talking to one another. So we
are you
will.
6 feet away from your phone right now?
I've sterilized it, man. And my phone you can eat off of it. So, we got that going.
Yeah.
I am clean. I got to tell you, man, I am clean.
Awesome.
So we're going to keep that up, and we're going to keep in contact and try to provide. Look, people are holed up in their homes. They have their music, and hopefully we're going to, we've got a track coming out on the 27th of March, and hopefully people will enjoy that. I mean, there's a lot of 7 Horse music out there. Everybody needs something to take their mind off a
Yeah.
crisis like this. So there's music, there'll be a podcast, and we'll be on social media sharing our experiences, and, trying to put as much positivity out there as we can.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is kind of key. And the mental game right now
Right.
is key. Keep it together.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Keep it over the plate.
Yeah. All right. So I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. We'll be back with another one. Thanks
Stay
for
safe.
listening to the 7 Horse Nation podcast.